This isn't revenge. It's evidence.
I thought marriage was for life. Turns out so is herpes, and both leave you wondering what the heck you were thinking when you signed up for either. My name is Mark Dorsey, and 3 months ago, I had what most people would call a decent life. 38 years old, ex-cop turned insurance investigator, living in a middle-class Connecticut suburb with my wife Elise and our 10-year-old daughter Emma. The American dream, right? Wrong. The American dream doesn't include finding your wife in bed with a French art dealer named Julien Lafitte. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It started with the little things. Elise working late at her luxury travel company, taking mysterious phone calls at 2 a.m, coming home smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She'd started dressing differently too. Designer clothes, fancy jewelry, the kind of stuff that cost more than my monthly salary. "Dad, Mom's acting weird again," Emma said one Tuesday morning, spooning cereal into her mouth with the practiced efficiency of a kid who'd learned to fend for herself. Emma was sharp as a tack, with her mother's blonde hair and my suspicious nature. "Weird how?" I asked, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, the one that said, "World's okayest dad." "She's been speaking French on the phone? Since when does Mom speak French?" Good question. Since when did Elise speak French? In 15 years of marriage, the most exotic language I'd heard her speak was ordering Thai food. "Maybe she's planning a surprise trip," I said, not believing it myself. Emma rolled her eyes. "Dad, you're a terrible liar. That's probably why you quit being a cop." "I quit being a cop because I got tired of dealing with criminals. Little did I know I was married to one." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Emma looked at me with those big blue eyes that saw way too much for a 10-year-old. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "No, sweetheart, we're just going through a rough patch." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The rough patch had turned into a sinkhole, and I was falling fast. That night, Elise came home at midnight, reeking of wine and that same expensive cologne. She claimed she'd been at a client dinner, but her lipstick was smudged and her hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it. "How was your client dinner?" I asked, not looking up from the insurance fraud case I was reviewing. "Fine." Boring. You know how these things are. I didn't know, actually. In all the years she'd worked at Prestige Travel Solutions, she'd never had a client dinner that kept her out past 10 o'clock. "Which client?" She paused just for a second, but I caught it. "The Hendersons. They're planning a European tour." I nodded and went back to my paperwork, but my cop instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I followed my wife to work. Elise drove her silver BMW to the office building downtown, parked in her usual spot, and walked inside. Normal enough. But at lunch, instead of eating at her desk like usual, she drove to the Marriott downtown. I watched from across the street as she walked into the hotel bar. 5 minutes later, a man joined her. Tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit that screamed European money. They didn't shake hands. They kissed. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a full-blown, tongue-down-the-throat kiss that made my stomach turn. So that was it. 15 years of marriage, and my wife was screwing around with some foreign pretty boy. I could have confronted her then. Should have, probably. But I'm an investigator by trade, and investigators gather evidence before they make accusations. So I started digging. Julien Lafitte, age 40, French national, owner of an upscale art gallery in Manhattan. Divorced, no kids, the kind of guy who probably used words like exquisite and divine without irony. He'd been in the country for 3 years on a business visa, and according to his gallery's website, he specialized in bringing European sophistication to American collectors. Apparently, he also specialized in bringing European sophistication to American wives. I found receipts hidden in Elise's car, expensive restaurants, hotels, lingerie shops. She'd opened a credit card I didn't know about and racked up $20,000 in charges. There were text messages on her phone, written in broken English, with a French accent I could practically hear through the screen. "Mon amour, tonight was magnifique. I cannot wait to hold you again. Your husband, he suspects nothing. Soon we will be together always, ma chérie." Reading those messages felt like swallowing glass, but the worst was yet to come. I found the passport while looking for our tax documents. Hidden in the back of our bedroom safe, behind the birth certificates and insurance papers, was a French passport with Emma's picture and a name I didn't recognize, Emma Lafitte. That's when I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was a kidnapping plot. The next few days were a blur of rage, planning, and terrible coffee. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely function. Every time I looked at Emma, I wanted to grab her and run. Every time I looked at Elise, I wanted to shake her until she came to her senses. But I'm a professional. I've dealt with insurance fraud, missing persons cases, and corporate espionage. I knew that emotional reactions led to mistakes, and mistakes led to losing everything that mattered. So I called Rico Martinez, my old partner from the police force. Rico had left the department the same time I did, but for different reasons. He'd gotten tired of the politics and opened his own private investigation firm. If anyone could help me figure out how to handle this mess, it was Rico. "Jesus Christ, Mark," Rico said when I showed him the evidence. We were sitting in his office, a cramped space above a pizza shop that smelled like pepperoni and disappointment. "This is bad, really bad. Tell me something I don't know." "Okay, here's something you don't know. Your wife's boyfriend has connections. I ran his name through my contacts, and Julian Lafitte isn't just some art dealer. He's been flagged by Interpol for possible money laundering and art forgery. The guy's dirty." That explained the expensive lifestyle. "What about the passport?" "Fake, but a good fake. Professional quality. This isn't some spur-of-the-moment thing, Mark. They've been planning this for months, maybe longer." I stared at Emma's photo on the fraudulent passport. My little girl, who still asked me to check under her bed for monsters, was being turned into a pawn in some elaborate international scheme. "What's my move here, Rico?" "Legally, you call the FBI, report the passport fraud, and hope they can stop Elise before she disappears with Emma." "And unofficially?" Rico grinned, the same expression he used to get when we were cops and someone had really pissed him off. "Unofficially, we make their lives so miserable they'll wish they'd never heard your name." That night, I confronted Elise. Not about the affair. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, but about the late nights, the mysterious expenses, the way she'd been treating Emma like a stranger. "You're being paranoid," she said, not even looking up from her laptop. "I'm working hard to provide for this family." By spending $20,000 on credit cards I didn't know about? That got her attention. She looked up, and for just a second, I saw fear in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Visa card, Elise. The one with the bills going to a P.O. box downtown. The one you've been using to pay for hotel rooms and expensive dinners." She closed the laptop slowly, buying time to think. "I wanted to surprise you for our anniversary." "Our anniversary is in October. It's March." I like to plan ahead. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and demand the truth. Instead, I just nodded and walked away. Let her think she'd fooled me. Let her get comfortable. In my experience, comfortable criminals made stupid mistakes. The mistake came 2 days later. I was supposed to be in Hartford, investigating a suspicious car accident for an insurance company. Instead, I was parked across the street from our house, watching through binoculars as a black Mercedes pulled into my driveway. Julian Lafitte got out of the car like he owned the place. Expensive suit, designer sunglasses, the kind of confident swagger that came from never being told no. He walked up to my front door, and let himself in with a key to my house that my wife had given to her lover. I sat in my car for exactly 10 minutes, timing it on my watch. 10 minutes to let the rage build, to let it crystallize into something cold and sharp and useful. Then I drove home. The front door was unlocked. I could hear voices upstairs. Elise laughing at something Julian had said in that accent that probably made her weak in the knees. I climbed the stairs slowly, quietly, using the skills I'd learned in 20 years of police work. The bedroom door was open. They were on my bed, on the sheets I'd paid for, in the house I'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford. Elise was wearing lingerie I'd never seen before, black lace that probably cost more than my car payment. Julianne was wearing even less. "Well," I said from the doorway, "this is awkward." They sprang apart like teenagers caught by their parents. Elise grabbed a sheet to cover herself. Julian reached for his pants, but I was faster. "Don't bother getting dressed on my account," I said, walking into the room. "Although I have to say, Julianne, that's not the most impressive equipment I've ever seen. No wonder you need fancy clothes to compensate." "Mark, I can explain," Elise started. "I'm sure you can. But first, let's have a conversation with your boyfriend here." I turned to Julian, who was trying to edge toward the door. "Going somewhere, Frenchie?" "This is not what it appears." "Really?" "Because it appears that you're screwing my wife in my bed while wearing underwear that looks like it came from a Paris gift shop. Did you get those at the Louvre?" Julian's face flushed red. You cannot speak to me this way. Actually, I can. This is my house. That's my wife. And those are apparently your ridiculous underpants. So I'll speak to you however I want. I grabbed his clothes from the floor and walked to the window. Our bedroom was on the second floor, overlooking the front yard where all the neighbors could see. Mark, don't, Elise said. I threw Julian's clothes out the window. Shirt, pants, jacket, shoes, everything landed on the front lawn like expensive confetti. There you go, Romeo. Your chariot awaits. Julian looked at the window, then at me, then at Elise. You said he was weak. You said he would not fight. Weak? I laughed. Buddy, I spent 15 years arresting people who thought they were smarter than me. You want to see weak? Weak is a middle-aged French guy caught with his pants down, literally. I grabbed him by the arm and marched him toward the stairs. He tried to pull away, but I'd kept in shape since leaving the force, and he was softer than his expensive suit suggested. Mark, stop! Elise was following us, wrapped in the sheet like a toga. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? Lady, your boyfriend is about to take a walk of shame in his underwear, and I'm the one embarrassing myself. I opened the front door and gave Julian a gentle shove onto the porch. There you go, Casanova. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. He stood there for a moment, nearly bare on my front porch, looking at his clothes scattered across the lawn. Mrs. Green from next door was watering her flowers and pretending not to stare. The mailman had stopped his truck to watch the show. This is not over, Julian said, trying to maintain some dignity while picking up his pants. You're right, I replied. It's not over. It's just getting started. The next morning, Elise was gone. So was Emma's passport, the real one this time, and $20,000 from our joint savings account. She'd left a note on the kitchen table, written in her careful handwriting. Mark, I'm sorry it had to end this way. Emma and I are going somewhere you can't hurt us anymore. Don't try to find us. Hurt them? I'd never laid a hand on either of them. But I guess humiliating her lover in front of the neighbors counted as violence in Elise's twisted worldview. I called the police, but they weren't much help. Elise was Emma's mother. She had every legal right to take her daughter on a trip. The fact that she'd cleaned out our bank account was a civil matter, not a criminal one. The fake passport was more serious, but without Elise and Julian around to arrest, there wasn't much they could do. Give it a few days, said Detective Sarah Collins, a woman I'd worked with back in my cop days. Most of these domestic situations resolve themselves. She'll probably come back when she runs out of money. But I knew Elise wasn't coming back, and I knew where she'd gone. Rico helped me track them down. Elise had used her credit card to buy 3 first-class tickets to Paris, her, Emma, and Julian. They'd flown out of JFK 6 hours after I'd thrown Julian out of my house. 3 tickets, Rico pointed out. They planned this whole thing, the confrontation, the dramatic exit, everything. You played right into their hands. He was right. I'd let my emotions get the better of me, and now my daughter was on another continent, with a criminal and a woman who'd chosen her lover over her family. So what now? I asked. Now you decide how far you're willing to go to get Emma back. The answer was simple, as far as it took. I'd never been to Paris, never had a reason to leave the country, but I had a passport from my police days, and I had contacts who could help me navigate the French legal system. More importantly, I had Rico, who knew a guy who could make things happen. Luc Moreau, Rico explained, showing me a photo on his phone. Ex-gendarme now works private investigations in Paris. He owes me a favor from a case we worked together a few years ago. Luc looked like Central Casting's idea of a French detective, thin, sharp-featured, with the kind of mustache that went out of style in America around 1975. But Rico vouched for him, and that was good enough for me. I flew to Paris 3 days later, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a burning desire to get my daughter back. The flight gave me 8 hours to think, to plan, to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. By the time we landed at Charles de Gaulle, I had a strategy. Step 1, find Emma and make sure she was safe. Step 2, gather evidence of Julian's criminal activities. Step 3, destroy both of them so completely they'd never be able to hurt anyone again. Luc met me at the airport looking exactly like his photo except older and more tired. You are Mark Dorsey? He asked in heavily accented English. That's me? Rico. He tells me you have problems with your wife and a French criminal. This is correct. That's putting it mildly. Luc nodded. In France, we have a saying, La vengeance est un plat qui se mange froid. Revenge is a dish best served cold. You understand this? I understand it. I'm just not sure I agree with it. You will learn. Come, we have much work to do. Luke had already done some preliminary investigation. Julien owned a gallery in the Marais district, lived in an expensive apartment near the Louvre, and had a reputation for selling questionable artwork to wealthy American tourists. More importantly, he was married. Married? I stared at the photograph Luke handed me. A petite brunette with the kind of elegant beauty that screamed old French money. He's married, and he's screwing around with my wife? His wife, she is Isabelle Dubois Lafitte, very wealthy family, very traditional. If she discovers her husband's affair with an American woman... Luke shrugged in that particularly French way that conveyed volumes. She doesn't know. She knows he travels frequently for business. She does not know he brings American mistresses to their apartment. This was getting better and better. Not only was Julien a criminal and a kidnapper, he was also an adulterer who was cheating on his wife with my wife. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a baguette. Where's my daughter? Enrolled at a private school in the 16th arrondissement. Very expensive, very exclusive. Your wife, she is living with Julien in his apartment. They tell people they are engaged. Engaged. The word hit me like a physical blow. Elise was planning to marry this creep, to make him Emma's stepfather, to erase me from their lives completely. I want to see her. Emma, this is dangerous. If your wife sees you, she won't see me. I used to be a cop, remember? I know how to watch people without being watched. The school was everything you'd expect from a French private academy. Old stone buildings, manicured gardens, and kids who looked like they'd been born wearing designer uniforms. I watched from across the street as children filed out for recess, looking for the familiar flash of blonde hair and blue eyes. There she was, Emma, looking smaller than I remembered, wearing a navy blue uniform that probably cost more than most people's rent. She was sitting alone on a bench, reading a book, while the other kids played around her. My heart broke a little. Emma had always been social, always surrounded by friends. Seeing her isolated like this, in a foreign country where she didn't speak the language, made me want to march across the street and grab her. But I couldn't, not yet. If I moved too fast, Elise would disappear again, and this time I might never find them. Instead, I watched. I learned Emma's routine, the route she took to school, the cafe where Elise met her for lunch twice a week. I followed Julien to his gallery, his apartment, his favorite restaurants. I became a ghost in their lives, invisible but always present, and I waited for my opportunity. The opportunity came during a gallery opening at Julien's shop. I'd been watching the place for a week, learning the patterns, the security, the layout. Luke had provided me with an invitation. Apparently, he had connections in the art world that he preferred not to discuss. The gallery was full of pretentious people drinking expensive wine and pretending to understand abstract paintings that looked like they'd been created by drunk toddlers. Julien was in his element, schmoozing with potential buyers, speaking rapid French peppered with English art terms. I waited until he was deep in conversation with an elderly American couple, then made my move. The gallery's office was on the second floor, accessible by a narrow staircase behind a velvet rope. The lock was simple, a basic deadbolt that took me about 30 seconds to pick. Julien's office was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive furniture, abstract art on the walls, and a desk that probably cost more than my car. But it was what I found in his filing cabinet that made the trip worthwhile. Documents, lots of them. Bills of sale for paintings that had been sold multiple times to different buyers. Shipping receipts for artwork that had never left the warehouse. Insurance claims for pieces that were supposedly destroyed, but were actually hanging in the gallery downstairs. Julien Lafitte wasn't just an art dealer. He was running an elaborate insurance fraud scheme, selling fake paintings to unsuspecting buyers while claiming the originals had been lost or damaged. It was exactly the kind of white-collar crime I'd investigated dozens of times as an insurance investigator. I photographed everything with my phone, making sure to capture the signatures, the dates, the account numbers. This was enough evidence to put Julien away for years, maybe decades. But I wasn't done yet. I planted a small recording device behind his desk, a gift from Luke's collection of surveillance equipment. Then I returned to the party downstairs, grabbed a glass of wine, and waited for the show to begin. "Excuse me," I said, approaching Julien during a lull in the conversation. "I'm interested in that Monet in the corner. Is it authentic?" Julien looked at me with the kind of polite disdain reserved for tourists who couldn't pronounce Louvre correctly. Of course it is authentic. Everything in my gallery is genuine. Really? Because I'm an insurance investigator from the United States, and that painting looks remarkably similar to one that was reported stolen from a collector in Connecticut last year. The color drained from Julian's face. Around us, the conversation stopped as people turned to listen. I think there has been a mistake. No mistake. Mark Dorsey, Dorsey Investigations. I specialize in art fraud. I pulled out my business card and handed it to him with a smile. I'm here on vacation with my wife and daughter. Small world, isn't it? Julian's hand was shaking as he took the card. Your wife and daughter? Elise and Emma Dorsey. Though I understand Elise has been going by a different name lately. Something French and romantic, I'm sure. The elderly American couple was staring at us now, along with half the gallery. Julian looked like he was about to be sick. I think perhaps we should discuss this privately. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. I'm off duty tonight, just enjoying the art and the company. I raised my wine glass in a mock toast. To authentic experiences and genuine relationships. I walked away, leaving Julian standing there with my business card and the growing realization that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The recording device I'd planted captured everything that happened next. Julian's panicked phone calls to his associates, his desperate attempts to move inventory, his increasingly frantic conversations with Elise about changing their plans. But the real payoff came 3 days later, when I followed Julien to a restaurant in Montmartre where he was meeting his wife for lunch. Isabelle Dubois-Lafitte was even more beautiful in person than in her photographs. She had the kind of effortless elegance that came from generations of good breeding and better money. She was also, according to Luke's research, fiercely traditional and utterly devoted to her marriage. I waited until they were halfway through their meal, then sent a text message to Isabelle's phone. The message contained a single photograph. Julien and Elise kissing outside the Marriott Hotel back in Connecticut, along with a simple message. I thought you should know. A concerned friend. I watched from across the restaurant as Isabelle read the message. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, hurt, and, finally, rage. She said something to Julien in rapid French that made him drop his fork. The argument that followed was spectacular. Voices raised, wine glasses thrown, the kind of scene that made other diners stop eating to watch. Isabelle stormed out, leaving Julien sitting alone at the table with the check and the dawning realization that his marriage was over. But I still wasn't done. That night, I called Elise's boss at Prestige Travel Solutions and had an interesting conversation about employee conduct and the company's reputation. I may have mentioned seeing Elise in some compromising photographs with a married client, and how unfortunate it would be if those images found their way to the travel industry trade publications. Elise was fired the next morning. I also had a chat with the headmaster at Emma's school, posing as a concerned family friend who'd heard disturbing rumors about her home situation. Private schools, especially expensive ones, don't like scandal. Emma was quietly transferred to a different institution, one where I happened to know the security guard, thanks to Luke's connections. Within a week, Julien's wife had filed for divorce and frozen their joint bank accounts. His gallery was under investigation by French authorities. Elise was unemployed and facing deportation, and Emma was safely enrolled in a school where I could keep an eye on her. But they still had one card left to play. The call came at 3 a.m, Paris time. I was sleeping in a cheap hotel near the Bastille when my phone rang. Mark? Emma's voice was small and scared. Dad, I need help. I was instantly awake. Emma, sweetheart, where are you? I don't know, some hotel. Mom and Julian are fighting, and they're talking about going away again, somewhere far away where you can't find us. Are you safe? Are you hurt? I'm okay, but Dad, I want to come home. I don't like it here. I don't understand what anyone is saying, and Mom is different. She's mean now. My heart was breaking. Listen to me, sweetheart. Can you see any signs outside the window? Anything that might tell me where you are? There's a big tower with lights on it and water, like a river or something. The Eiffel Tower and the Seine. They were staying somewhere with a view of both, which narrowed it down to a handful of expensive hotels. Emma, I need you to do something for me. Can you hide this phone somewhere safe? Keep it turned off unless it's an emergency, okay? And if anything happens, if you feel scared or unsafe, you call me immediately. Okay, Dad, are you coming to get me? Yes, sweetheart, I'm coming to get you, I promise. I hung up and immediately called Luke. They're planning to run, Tonight, probably. We need to move fast. Luke was already awake. Apparently, French private investigators didn't sleep much either. I have been monitoring Julien's communications. He has made arrangements to leave the country. Private jet, false documents, the whole operation. Where are they going? Morocco, I think. Or perhaps Argentina, somewhere without extradition treaties. This was it. If they got on that plane, I'd never see Emma again. Elise and Julian would disappear into the international underground, and my daughter would grow up thinking her father had abandoned her. What's the plan? We intercept them before they reach the airport. But Mark, you must understand, if we do this, there is no going back. You will be breaking French law. There will be consequences. I don't care about consequences. I care about getting my daughter back. It took us 2 hours to find them. The Hotel Plaza Athénée, a 5-star palace near the Champs-Élysées that cost more per night than most people made in a month. Julien had booked the penthouse suite under a false name, but money talks in any language, and Luke had contacts who listened. The hotel's security was impressive, but not impenetrable. Luke created a distraction in the lobby while I made my way to the service elevator. 20 years of police work had taught me that people see uniforms, not faces, so I'd borrowed a maintenance worker's coveralls from the hotel's laundry service. The penthouse floor was quiet, expensive carpet muffling every sound. I could hear voices from behind the door of the suite, Elise and Julien arguing about something in a mixture of English and French. I knocked on the door, clipboard in hand, trying to look bored and official. "Maintenance," I called out in my best attempt at a French accent. "There is a problem with the plumbing on this floor." The door opened, and Julien appeared, looking harried and suspicious. "We did not call for maintenance. The hotel. They send me to check all the rooms. Water damage from the floor above." I held up my clipboard and tried to look like I'd rather be anywhere else. "It will take only a moment." Julien hesitated, then stepped aside. The suite was enormous. Living room, dining room, multiple bedrooms, all decorated in the kind of understated luxury that screamed money. Suitcases were stacked by the door, ready for a quick departure. Elise emerged from one of the bedrooms, looking tired and stressed. She'd lost weight since leaving Connecticut, and there were dark circles under her eyes that expensive makeup couldn't quite hide. "Who is this?" she asked Julien in English. "Maintenance worker. He says there is water damage." I kept my head down, pretending to examine the walls for signs of moisture. Through an open bedroom door, I could see Emma sitting on a bed, reading a book. She looked up when she heard voices, and our eyes met for just a moment. I held a finger to my lips, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. "Everything looks fine here," I said, backing toward the door. "No problems with the plumbing." But as I reached for the door handle, Elise stepped closer, studying my face. "Wait a minute," she said slowly. "I know you." That's when I dropped the act. "Hello, Elise. Nice place you've got here. The French taxpayers are going to love knowing their investigation money paid for the penthouse suite." Elise's face went white. "Mark, how did you find you? Please. I'm a professional investigator, and you're an amateur criminal. This wasn't exactly a challenge." Julien was reaching for his phone, probably to call security, but I was faster. I grabbed his wrist and applied just enough pressure to make him drop the device. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Frenchie. The police are already on their way, and they're very interested in your art collection. Something about insurance fraud and stolen paintings." "You cannot prove anything," Julien said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can. I have photographs of your financial records, recordings of your conversations, and testimony from several of your victims. The French authorities are very thorough when it comes to international art fraud." Emma had appeared in the bedroom doorway, still holding her book. "Dad? Hey, sweetheart. Ready to go home?" "You cannot take her," Elise said, stepping between us. "She's my daughter. She's our daughter, and you kidnapped her? I'm her mother. I have rights. You had rights. Then you forged documents, fled the country, and conspired with a criminal to steal my child. Those rights are gone, Elise." The argument might have continued, but that's when the French police arrived. Luke had been busy while I was playing maintenance worker, and the authorities were very interested in the evidence I'd gathered about Julien's activities. The next few hours were a blur of police statements, legal paperwork, and bureaucratic confusion. Julien was arrested on multiple charges related to art fraud and money laundering. Elise was detained as a material witness and faced deportation back to the United States, where she'd have to answer for the kidnapping charges. Emma and I were free to go. The flight back to Connecticut was quiet. Emma slept most of the way, exhausted from the emotional trauma of the past few weeks. I spent the time thinking about what came next, about how to rebuild our lives after everything that had happened. The media was waiting when we landed at Bradley International Airport. Somehow, the story had leaked. American father rescues daughter from international kidnapping plot. The headlines wrote themselves. "How does it feel to have your daughter back?" a reporter shouted as we walked through the terminal. "Like Christmas morning and the 4th of July rolled into one," I replied, keeping Emma close to my side. "But mostly, it feels like justice." We drove home in Rico's car, avoiding the news vans parked outside our house. The place looked exactly the same as when I'd left it, but everything felt different. Smaller somehow. Quieter. Emma went straight to her room, needing time to process everything that had happened. I sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and trying to figure out what to do next. The phone rang constantly. Reporters, lawyers, neighbors wanting to know what had happened. I ignored most of the calls, but one I had to take. "Mr. Dorsey, this is Janet Walsh from Child Protective Services. We need to discuss your daughter's situation." My blood ran cold. "What about her situation?" "Well, with your wife facing criminal charges and the international incident, we need to make sure Emma is in a stable environment. She's with her father, in her own home, sleeping in her own bed for the first time in weeks. How much more stable can you get? I understand your position, Mr. Dorsey, but there are procedures we have to follow. I'll need to interview Emma, assess the home environment, make sure everything is appropriate." I wanted to tell Janet Walsh exactly what she could do with her procedures, but I bit my tongue. The last thing Emma needed was more bureaucratic complications. The interview went well. Emma was articulate, mature, and clearly happy to be home. The house was clean, the refrigerator was stocked, and I had a steady job that could support us both. Janet Walsh seemed satisfied, but warned me that there would be follow-up visits and court hearings related to Elise's case. "What's going to happen to Mom?" Emma asked after the social worker left. It was a question I'd been dreading. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that her mother had chosen a criminal over her own family? "Your mom made some bad choices, sweetheart. She's going to have to face the consequences of those choices. Is she going to jail? I don't know, maybe. But whatever happens, it's not your fault, and it doesn't change how much I love you." Emma nodded, processing this information with the resilience that kids somehow manage in impossible situations. "Dad, are you going to be okay?" The question surprised me. Here was my daughter, who'd been kidnapped and dragged halfway around the world, worried about whether I was going to be okay. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm going to be fine. We both are." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. The legal battles were just beginning. Elise's lawyer was already making noise about challenging the kidnapping charges, claiming she'd been acting in Emma's best interests. Julian's family had hired expensive attorneys who were working to get him released on bail. The story had gone national, then international. I was getting interview requests from CNN, Fox News, even some French television stations. Everyone wanted to hear about the American father who'd tracked down his kidnapped daughter in Paris. I turned them all down. This wasn't about fame or publicity. It was about protecting Emma and making sure the people who'd hurt us faced justice. But justice, it turned out, was more complicated than I'd expected. Elise was released on bail after 2 weeks in custody. Her lawyer had argued that she was a flight risk, but the judge was swayed by character witnesses who testified about her previously clean record and her role as Emma's mother. She came to the house on a Tuesday afternoon, driving a rental car, and looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past month. I watched from the kitchen window as she sat in the driveway for several minutes, working up the courage to knock on the door. "Hello, Mark," she said when I finally answered. She looked tired, defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd been planning her escape to Paris. "Elise, I'd like to see Emma. She's at school." "I know, I was hoping we could talk first. Just the two of us." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the couch where we'd watched movies together, where Emma had opened Christmas presents, where we'd planned our future as a family. "I know you hate me," she began. "I don't hate you, Elise. I'm disappointed in you. I'm angry at the choices you made, but I don't hate you. I never meant for things to go this far. Which part? The affair, the fake passport, the kidnapping? At what point did you think maybe this is a bad idea?" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I was so unhappy, Mark. I felt trapped, like I was disappearing. Julian made me feel alive again. So you decided to destroy our family. I thought Emma would be better off. Julian has money, connections. He could give her opportunities. He's a criminal, Elise. He was using you to launder money through his art gallery. Did you know that? Did you know you were part of an international fraud scheme? The look on her face told me she hadn't known. Elise had always been naive about people's motives, always willing to see the best in everyone. It's one of the things I'd loved about her, back when she used that optimism on our behalf. I made a mistake, she whispered. You made a lot of mistakes. The question is, what are you going to do about them now? We talked for an hour, hashing out the practical details of our destroyed marriage. Divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, financial settlements, all the bureaucratic aftermath of a life that had fallen apart. Emma came home while we were talking, and the reunion was awkward and painful. My daughter was polite but distant with her mother, answering questions with single-word responses and avoiding eye contact. I love you, baby, Elise said as she was leaving. I know, Emma replied, but she didn't say she loved her back. After Elise left, Emma and I sat in the kitchen, eating takeout Chinese food and not talking about the elephant in the room. Are you okay? I finally asked. I guess. It's weird seeing her again. She looks different. Different how? Smaller, like she shrunk or something. I knew what Emma meant. Elise had always seemed larger than life to me, confident and capable and sure of herself. The woman who'd sat on our couch that afternoon was none of those things. Do you think she's sorry? Emma asked. I think she's sorry she got caught. I'm not sure she's sorry she did it. That's what I think too. The trial was set for 6 months later. Elise had pled not guilty to the kidnapping charges, claiming she'd been acting in Emma's best interests and had never intended to permanently deprive me of custody. Her lawyer was arguing for a suspended sentence and probation. Julien, meanwhile, was facing federal charges in both France and the United States. His art fraud scheme had been more extensive than anyone had realized, involving millions of dollars in fake paintings and insurance claims. He was looking at decades in prison. But before the trial could begin, something unexpected happened. I was at Murphy's Pub, a local dive bar where I'd been spending too many evenings since Elise's return, when Rico walked in with a grim expression. We need to talk, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. What's wrong now? Julian made bail. His family posted a $2 million bond, and he's out of custody pending trial. I set down my beer. So he's not in France anymore. He flew to New York yesterday, and nobody knows where he went from there. The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. Julian was free, desperate, and probably looking for revenge. He'd lost his wife, his business, his reputation, and his freedom because of me. Men in his position did stupid, dangerous things. You think he'll come here? I think he's got nothing left to lose, and that makes him unpredictable. Rico was right. That night, I installed a security system in the house and started carrying the .38 Colt I'd kept since my police days. Emma noticed the changes, but didn't ask questions. She was getting good at not asking questions about things she didn't want to know. The confrontation came 3 days later, but not in the way I'd expected. I was picking Emma up from soccer practice when I saw him. Julian was sitting in a black sedan across the street from the school, watching the kids come out. He looked different, thinner, unshaven, wearing a cheap suit instead of his usual designer clothes. I called Rico while walking Emma to my car, keeping my voice casual so she wouldn't panic. He's here, at Emma's school. I'm 5 minutes away, don't do anything stupid. But Julian wasn't waiting for backup. As soon as he saw me on the phone, he got out of his car and started walking toward us. Emma, get in the car and lock the doors, I said quietly. Dad, what's wrong? Just do it. Now. She must have heard something in my voice because she obeyed without argument. I turned to face Julian as he approached, my hand moving instinctively toward the tool under my jacket. Hello, Mark, he said. His English was more heavily accented than I remembered, probably from stress and exhaustion. Julian, you're looking well. Prison food must agree with you. You destroyed my life. No, you destroyed your life. I just documented it. We stood there in the school parking lot, 2 middle-aged men facing off while parents and children streamed around us. It should have been ridiculous, but there was something dangerous in Julian's eyes that made me stay alert. You took everything from me, my wife, my business, my freedom. You took my daughter, I'd say we're even. I loved her. Emma, I mean. I would have been a good father to her. You're a criminal and a fraud. You would have been a terrible father. That's when he pulled the knife. It wasn't a big knife, just a folding blade, the kind you'd use to open packages or cut rope. but in the hands of a desperate man, it was dangerous enough. "Give me the girl," he said, his voice shaking. "Give me Emma, and we can end this." I laughed. Actually laughed, standing there in a school parking lot with a knife pointed at my chest. "You're insane if you think I'm giving you my daughter." "Then I will take her." He lunged forward, clumsy and desperate. I sidestepped easily. 20 years of police work had taught me how to handle amateur criminals with tools. The knife slashed through empty air as I grabbed his wrist and twisted. Julian screamed and dropped the blade. I spun him around and slammed him face first against the hood of his car, using the same restraint techniques I'd learned at the police academy. "That was stupid," I said, applying pressure to his arm until he stopped struggling. "Really, really stupid." Rico arrived just as I was zip-tying Julian's hands behind his back. "Jesus, Mark, what happened?" "Our French friend decided to threaten my daughter with a knife. I decided to show him why that was a bad idea." The police arrived a few minutes later, followed by an ambulance and what seemed like half the local news media. Julian was arrested for assault, attempted kidnapping, and violation of his bail conditions. This time, there would be no bail, no family money to buy his freedom. Emma watched the whole thing from the car, her face pressed against the window. When it was over, when Julian was handcuffed and loaded into a police cruiser, she finally got out. "Is it over now, Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart. It's over now." But it wasn't over. Not quite yet. The final confrontation came at Julian's sentencing hearing 2 months later. Elise was there, sitting in the back of the courtroom, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. She'd pled guilty to the kidnapping charges in exchange for a suspended sentence and 5 years probation. Her lawyer had argued that she'd been manipulated by Julian, that she was as much a victim as anyone else. I didn't buy it, but the judge apparently did. Julian got 15 years for the art fraud, plus another 5 for the attempted kidnapping at Emma's school. He'd be an old man when he got out, assuming he survived that long in federal prison. As the guards led him away, he turned and looked directly at me. "This is not finished," he said. "Yeah, it is," I replied. "It's finished." Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting with their cameras and microphones. They wanted to know how I felt about the verdict, whether I thought justice had been served, what my plans were for the future. "I feel like my daughter is safe," I told them. "That's all that matters." Emma was waiting in Rico's car, doing homework and pretending not to notice the media circus. She looked up when I got in. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, sweetheart, we can go home." As we drove away from the courthouse, I thought about everything that had happened, everything we'd been through. Elise's betrayal, the chase to Paris, the confrontation at the school. It had been the worst year of my life, but also, in some ways, the most important. I'd learned things about myself I'd never known. I'd discovered that I was capable of traveling to a foreign country, infiltrating criminal organizations, and outsmarting international fraudsters. I'd learned that I would do anything, literally anything, to protect my daughter. Most importantly, I'd learned that Emma and I were going to be okay. We were a team now, the two of us against the world, and that was enough. "Dad," Emma said as we pulled into our driveway. "Yeah?" "Thanks for coming to get me. Thanks for calling me when you needed help. Are we going to be okay?" I looked at our house, with its peeling paint and overgrown lawn, and thought about all the work we had ahead of us, rebuilding our lives, dealing with the aftermath of the trial, figuring out how to be a family of 2 instead of 3. "Yeah," I said, "we're going to be better than okay." And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. 6 months later, Emma and I were sitting in Murphy's pub. They had a family section where kids were allowed, celebrating her 11th birthday with burgers and milkshakes. It had become our tradition, just the 2 of us, no drama, no complications. "Dad," she said, dipping a French fry in ketchup, "do you ever miss Mom?" It was a question she'd never asked before, and I considered my answer carefully. "I miss the person I thought she was," I said finally. "But I don't miss the person she actually turned out to be." Emma nodded like this made perfect sense. "I don't miss her either. Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart, it's honest." "Good, because I like it better with just us." "Me too." As we finished our meal, I thought about Elise, probably sitting in some apartment across town, trying to rebuild her life after losing everything that mattered. I thought about Julian, sitting in a federal prison, counting the days until his release. I thought about all the ways this story could have ended differently, all the things that could have gone wrong. But mostly, I thought about the future. Emma's future. Our future together. College applications and driving lessons and first dates and all the normal problems that normal families dealt with. It was going to be a good life. Different from what I'd planned, but good. Ready to go home? I asked. Yeah, Emma said, sliding out of the booth. Let's go home. And that's exactly what we did. We went home, to our house with the peeling paint and overgrown lawn, to our life that was smaller but better than before, to our future that was uncertain but ours. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about destroying your enemies. It was about building something better from the wreckage they'd left behind. And that's exactly what Emma and I had done.